Now we're going to talk about another basic technique, infusing. And Jerry, now I know this is a very important technique, but I have never seen this in a cookbook.
But you've done it. I'm sure you've done it a lot of times. And the reason for that is anytime you've ever made a cup of tea, you've infused something. And it's a technique that you can use with fresh herbs. It's very easy. You get a wonderful flavor out of it. You don't have to chop the herbs. And it has a lot of different uses. I'm going to show you two different ways of using this.
Okay.
Now, when you're making tea, you just bring water to a boil, and you add your dried herbs or whatever, and just let it, and you turn it off, and you let it sit and steep. And that's exactly what we're going to do with these herbs. But instead of using water, I'm going to use other liquids.
Oh.
And right here I've got, this is just a simple syrup, which means it's 1 part of sugar, so maybe a cup of sugar and 2 cups of water.
Okay.
And I've just brought that to a boil, and we're going to use this to make a sorbet. And I want to get some rose geranium flavor into it, so I'm going to take this. Have you ever smelled rose geranium? You should smell that.
Actually.
It's related to the window box geranium, but it has it comes in all different flavors, and the rose is the most common. It has a fragrance just like roses. And all I'm going to do is, that's at the boiling point. I'm just going to throw that in. I'm just going to stir it around and let it sit, and maybe let it sit for about half an hour.
Okay.
And I'll just put it right there, and that's it.
So it's already boiled.
So you think you can do that?
Yeah, well, this reminds me of making maple syrup.
Right.
Where you do the sugar and the water and the maple flavoring.
So then I have another liquid. I have cream here.
Okay.
And what we're going to do with this is make a bay leaf whipped cream. Now, that sounds kind of strange, but actually the English make bay leaf custards all the time, and they use this technique. And so you just take the fresh bay leaves, and you just, this is about 2 cups of cream. I'm going to use about 5 fresh bay leaves. And maybe you'd like to smell one of those. They smell very different than the dried. And I'm just going to tear them up a little bit. Throw them in the boiling cream and take it off the heat.
Okay.
Let it sit maybe an hour, and then I can actually chill it down and whip it.
Is there any difference in the bay leaves that you use for that?
Definitely. This is the only culinary bay, and it's called, well, the Latin name would be Laurus nobilis, or it's called sweet bay. It's what you would, if you bought dry bay leaves in a jar, it's what you would get. But you want it to stay away from what's called the California bay, which has more of a eucalyptus-y flavor and apparently can be even toxic in large quantities.
Ooh.
Okay, now I'm going to show you a very simple thing to do once you've made this rose geranium syrup here. And we'll pretend that's been steeping for half an hour. I'm going to take some raspberry puree, and these are just nice fresh raspberries that I put through a food mill. And I'm just going to add enough of this syrup to taste, so that it tastes nice and sweet. And add a little bit of lemon juice, and then I'll taste it.
This is so simple.
Right, it's very, very simple. Just add a little bit of lemon juice, and let's taste it. We should get you a spoon so you can taste it too.
I thought you were going to let me taste it.
Over there. So you can even start tasting that rose geranium, even though it hasn't steeped that long.
That is so good.
Now all you have to do is put this in an ice cream machine, and you have raspberry sorbet with rose geranium. Or if you don't have an ice cream machine, you could just put it in a bowl in the freezer and keep stirring it about every 15 minutes, and you'll get what's called a granite, and it has a nice icy texture.
Jerry, I never would have thought of using a rose geranium in a raspberry sorbet. I mean, that just never would have occurred to me. Can you give us some examples of other herbs that might never occur to us to use, that we can use in desserts and different recipes like that?
Sure, I love to use herbs in desserts, and there are a lot that you might never have thought of. There are the ones that have sweet flavors like rose geranium and lavender and anise hyssop. Those are 3 that come to mind that are very nice. But then there's also herbs that you might not ever think of using with desserts, and those are things like sage and rosemary. And often those type of flavors go very well with fruits, and it's worth some experimentation.
It sounds like it, because that was wonderful.
My favorite herb is most likely the scented geranium, and the most common are probably rose and lemon, but there are some rather unique scented geraniums such as ginger and coconut. And my favorite thing to do with the scented geranium leaves, where you get most of your essence, is to put them in the bottom of a cake pan, pour the batter over, and as the cake cooks, you'll get a lovely scented lemon or rose or coconut cake.
Can you explain to us a little bit about when to add herbs in different recipes, and if in fact adding them at the beginning or the end of a recipe makes any difference in the flavor?
Well, it does. Most of us are used to adding herbs in the beginning of cooking, and that does work well with some of the more robust herbs. It's a nice thing to do with thymes and rosemary and sage, things like that. But there is a big difference, and fresh herbs lend themselves to being added at the very end as well.
Okay.
And you've made spaghetti sauce, haven't
yeah.
you, right? And you've added all your oregano and everything at the very beginning.
Right, and the longer it
tomato
simmers,
sauce.
the better it gets.
Right, well, I'm going to show you a very, very simple tomato sauce where I'm going to add the herbs at the very end.
Okay.
And I think you'll see a big difference in what you're used to as being tomato sauce.
Great.
I've got some chopped marjoram. This is the sweet marjoram. It's one of my favorite herbs. It's related to oregano, but it has a very nice, bright flavor. And the chopped basil, of course.
Okay.
So over here, I have just all I've done is peeled, seeded, and diced some tomatoes, and then I've heated up my olive oil and added the tomatoes and cooked them only for a couple of minutes. And then I'm just going to add the nice fresh herbs right in there, and I'll be very generous because it's
Wow.
a nice herby sauce. And then the sauce is done. I'm just going to add my nice fresh fettuccine.
That looks very different from my spaghetti sauce.
Well, I bet it takes a lot less time, too.
You're
I mean, of course, the other type of spaghetti sauce is delicious as well, but this is a good way to taste the fresh herbs added at the very end. Just going to throw that in there, put some of the tomatoes on top.
Looks very healthy.
It is. It is healthy. And it's ready for you to taste.
Okay. Now, Jerry, are there other combinations of herbs that you would use with a tomato sauce like this that would be great?
Oh, sure. There's all kinds of herbs that go nicely with tomatoes. I mean, what about rosemary or oregano? Or, you know what's even good with tomatoes is fresh mint. That would be very interesting, not very Italian.